Richard Cordray, a Democrat, will step down this month as director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. His 5-year term was scheduled to end in July 2018. Andrew Mangum for The New York Times, the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, said on Wednesday that he would leave the federal agency this month, removing the major opponent to the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle business regulations and unfetter Wall Street. As the Bureau's first director, Richard Cordray, a Democrat appointed by President Barack Obama, has been an active watchdog whose role took on outsized significance in an increasingly partisan Washington. To many Republicans, he embodied the kind of over-aggressive policing that they contend hamstrings businesses and quashes innovation. To Democrats, he was a champion of the public, fighting predatory companies and abusive practices that rip off ordinary people. Established 6 years ago as part of the Dodd-Frank Act, the agency has unusually broad power to combat abuses in a wide variety of financial products, including mortgages, credit cards, bank accounts, and student loans. Mr. Cordray, 58, pursued that mission with zeal. Under his leadership, the Bureau extracted nearly $12 billion in refunds and canceled debts for 29 million consumers. It cracked down on abusive debt collectors, strengthened protections for mortgage borrowers, and created a complaints system that helped hundreds of thousands of people resolve disputes with financial companies. Just hours after Mr. Cordray told his staff of his planned departure, the agency sued a debt collector that it said had broken state usury laws by charging illegally high interest rates. The agency has gotten a lot done, said Lisa Donner, the executive director of Americans for Financial Reform, a liberal advocacy group. The mission of the Bureau and the work it has done is incredibly popular, across party lines, with the public. Mr. Cordray's critics were quick to cheer his departure. Representative Jeb Hensarling of Texas, the Republican chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, called the Bureau a rogue agency that is long overdue for new leadership. Mr. Cordray has been a whipping boy on Capitol Hill for years. Congress called him to testify nearly 30 times, but in recent months he also came under attack from other federal agencies. In one case, the Justice Department sided with a mortgage lender that questioned the agency's constitutionality. The acting director of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, a major banking regulator, publicly undermined several of the Bureau's actions and traded heated letters with Mr. Cordray. But President Trump, who ran on a populist platform that harnessed Americans' anger toward Wall Street, largely stayed out of the fray. On Twitter, his favorite venting ground, he has not commented on or criticized the Consumer Bureau or its director. Mr. Cordray's 5-year term was scheduled to end in July 2018. He was widely expected to step down early to run for governor in Ohio, his home state. "Together we have made a real and lasting difference," Mr. Cordray wrote in an email to the agency's employees. "I am confident that you will continue to move forward, nurture this institution we have built together, and maintain its essential value to the American public. And I trust that new leadership will see that value also and work to preserve it." Mr. Cordray did not discuss his future plans in his email. A Bureau spokesman declined to comment. In the months since Mr. Trump was elected, Mr. Cordray unleashed a fusillade of regulations, with mixed success. The agency adopted a new rule in July that would have allowed consumers to band together in class actions against financial institutions. Last month, Congress overturned the rule, with Vice President Mike Pence breaking a 5,050 tie in the Senate. Other rules, including new protections on prepaid debit cards, withstood challenges. The agency recently imposed restrictions that will sharply curtail the payday lending market. By installing his own director, Mr. Trump will be able to reshape the agency to look more like other financial regulators, many of which are now run by former industry executives. He picked Randall K. Quarles, a former private equity executive and banking industry lawyer, to fill one of the top jobs at the Federal Reserve, and Stephen Mnuchin, a former investment banker at Goldman Sachs, heads the Treasury Department. One of the names being floated for the Consumer Bureau's leadership post is Todd J. Zywicki, a conservative law professor at George Mason University, according to two people familiar with the White House's discussions. They requested anonymity because the discussions are not public. Democrats pledged to fight any nominee they perceive to be too cozy with the financial industry. The White House has said it wants to stand up for the middle class, said Senator Sherrod Brown, an Ohio Democrat. If that's true, the president must nominate a successor who will put working people ahead of Wall Street. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Massachusetts Democrat, picked Mr. Cordray, a former Attorney General of Ohio, to be the agency's enforcement director before Mr. Obama appointed him to bureau director. On Wednesday, she praised Mr. Cordray for holding banks accountable and forcing companies to return money to the people they cheated, but with Mr. Cordray's departure, some of his actions will be in jeopardy. The CFPB's rulemaking agenda will grind to a halt and its enforcement profile will dramatically diminish, said Isaac Boltanski, the director of policy research at Compass Point Research Trading. The new director could abandon some rules still under development, like restrictions on debt collection, and settle a drop lawsuits that the Bureau is pursuing. One high-profile example is the case it brought this year against Navient, the nation's largest servicer of student loans. The agency claims that Navient misled millions of borrowers and illegally drove up their loan repayment costs. Navient, which is fighting the case, has denied any wrongdoing. Mr. Cordray struck a sanguine tone when asked this summer, in an interview with the New York Times, about his legacy. "I think it's impossible not to care about how those transitions will go," he said. "But you also have to recognize that there are some things that are within your control, and some things that are not." Pausing, he added, "Serenity, prayer, whatever is your way of coping." A version of this article appears in print on November 16, 2017, on page B4 of the New York edition with the headline "Consumer Regulator to Step Down from Office He Opened."